How are you guys doing? I think we've got a really awesome topic today, and one that I think a lot of us struggle with in some form or another. So I'd love also your comments on this, how you experience this, and yeah, I'll talk a bit about this at the end as well. But if this is something that you struggle with, it is a really awesome resource in the group that you can actually access a free coaching session. So it's a 45-minute session. And what we do is we then post it on the group afterwards. So we record the session and then we post it in the group. So it's basically like a way that you get help and it also benefits the rest of the group. So if you go to the about section of the group, you can find a link to book that session. And when you do that, it'll take you to a calendar. You just book whatever time and day suits you. If there is nothing that suits you there, just message me and we can set something up. We get on the call. When you're booking as well, you choose what you want to be coached on, and you can also give a few options. Or like, I'm not quite sure, but if it was this kind of thing, right, you could just say, too invested in my patients, or feel like I'm caring too much, and we can explore what it is exactly for you, and we record that session and we put it on the group. So I think that would be a really great thing to do, especially if you feel like it makes sense what I'm talking about today, but there's like a very specific thing for you that you're not really sure where this like caring too much and being exhausted from that is coming from for you. And then we can figure that out together. Okay, awesome. So I'd love to know from you guys as well, your experiences with this. Do you feel like you get into this space where you're like, I'm caring too much about my patients, or I'm like too invested in their health, in their outcomes, in their lives? And the way that I often hear this phrased by clinicians is, by the way, when I say by clinicians, I'm pretty much always in the same, like, I've been there as well. Let's put it that way. Like almost everything I talk about, I've had personal experience with. So this is never like, oh, you guys are doing this thing. It's like, I know, I've been there. This is how I navigated it. This is what I learned from it. So usually it's phrased as some version of, how do I find that balance between caring too much for my patients and not caring enough? And I want you to think about it almost like, when you're thinking about it in that way, you almost like have a little bit of a, like you're putting the brake on a little bit. You're like, I mustn't care too much. I mustn't like be too invested in my patients. And for most of us, what feels really good is to come from a place of really wanting to serve our patients, really wanting to help them. But then we're like almost putting the brake on that a little bit, because we're like, oh, I'm going to burn out if I care too much. I'm going to be exhausted if I care too much. It's going to, I'm going to lie awake at night if I care too much. And I want you to just think about the example of, let's say, a romantic relationship or like a really close friend. And just imagine saying the same thing. Like, I don't want to care about them too much. Right? And if you are like, yeah, I have that exact same thing in relationships, then this might be helpful for your relationship as well, because sometimes we have the same patterns in different areas of our lives. And other times we can like look at other areas of our lives and like almost borrow thoughts or borrow beliefs or borrow behaviors and see like, why is it different in these two areas of my life? So if it is different for you, think about like why that is. Why do you not worry about caring too much about someone, right? And think about, if you are caring a bit too much, or caring about caring too much, you're also going to have a little bit of that foot on the brake. You're going to be not quite wanting to be fully vulnerable with that person. You're going to be kind of protecting yourself in some way against that relationship and being fully yourself in that relationship, right? And it's the same thing with our patients. When we are not completely willing to be vulnerable with them, and vulnerable does not mean sharing your whole life story, okay? Vulnerable just means emotionally vulnerable to the patient. Someone once put this as being willing to let the world break your heart. And I always thought of that like in the context of patience, being willing for patience to break our heart. And so there's like this emotional vulnerability, this compassion, right? But that's where we get a little bit caught up, right? We like, this is different to other relationships. And of course it is in very important ways, right? Please don't think I'm saying like exactly how you are in your romantic relationship. That's exactly how you should be with patience, right? But essentially it is just another kind of relationship. So I want to offer that when we think about it as, I want to find the balance between caring too much and caring too little. There are two assumptions kind of baked into that line of questioning. And the one is that those two things are in opposition, right? And the second thing is, and I'll elaborate on both now. The second thing is that that caring is the problem, right? It's the same reason why compassion fatigue is such a misleading term, because then we think that compassion is the problem, right? We think that if I'm just too compassionate, I'm going to burn out. I'm going to have compassion fatigue. And when I say like that they are maybe not in opposition to each other, right? Caring too much and caring too little. Or at least when I say caring too much, I mean it in the way that we're thinking, like if I do that thing, I'm going to burn out, right? That type of caring too much and caring too little, I want to offer that they are both symptoms of the same thing. They are both the result of when we're actually making it about ourselves. And I know that might sound so strange. Be like, no, I'm like sacrificing myself for my patients, right? There's no way that I'm making that about myself. And think about it, like when you're caring too little, it's like really obvious that is coming from making it about you, right? Like you're not caring, you're not considering the other person at all. But when you care too much and your caring is essentially at the expense of you, like you feel exhausted caring about someone, it's causing you distress when someone is suffering. What we're often saying is some version of, I need you to be okay so that I'm okay. I need you to be helped by me so that I'm okay. Right? So some version of like, I need that to validate myself. I need that to feel worthy as a human, right? Because I've been taught that in order for me to feel worthy, I need to be helping people, right? So if you're not helped by me, I don't feel worthy. To feel like I'm a good clinician, right? To validate me as a clinician. Like I want to feel good at my job. So please be helped by me. Please don't suffer. Please let everything go perfectly. And sometimes to feel loved and appreciated, right? To also feel like your work is meaningful, right? If you're going to work every day and people aren't being helped by you, it can feel like, oh, my job is not very meaningful, right? So you almost need the other person to be helped in order for you to feel like your work is meaningful and purposeful and that it's worth that effort, right? So I want you to think about this, and this will help identify what it might be for you. But think about when it's not going well with your patients, right? If you had to just think of a scenario where your patient maybe didn't get better or, maybe didn't ever take the advice that you gave them and their life stayed exactly the same, some version of it's not going well with them. Think about, what do you make that mean? Do you make it mean something about yourself as a clinician, as a person, right? Kind of like I was talking about now, like my job is not meaningful, or like I'm obviously not very good at what I do. I'm obviously not a very good person, or whatever it is, right? Like, what do you make that mean? Do you make it mean something about yourself? Do you make it mean something about them, right? Like some form of judgment of them. Like they clearly don't want this enough. They don't take responsibility for their health. that judgment is not caring. That's not compassion, right? Making it mean something about yourself, also not compassion. Making it mean something about your your profession, like this is a thankless job, also not compassion. So it's very normal. I want to emphasize this. It's very normal for clinicians to have this, for us as clinicians to have these thoughts. I just want to separate that out from caring, because they are not the same thing, right? Where was I here? Just had some notes. So what I wanted to think about, or what I wanted to talk about, and that you can think about is, have you ever been in a situation where you were struggling and you voiced that to someone else, and all of a sudden you were comforting them and you were taking care of them because they were so distressed at what was happening for you? And we really are taught that when we care about someone, it means that we feel with them, that we kind of jump in the pool with them. We're suffering as much as they are. We need them to see that we are also suffering because they're suffering, in order to show that we care. And this is actually what they call empathic distress. So we are being distressed because of our empathy, and a certain kind of empathy, which is known as affective empathy, which means I feel with you. And I just want you to think about how helpful that is to you as the person struggling, when someone else is suffering as much as you are because of your suffering, and how helpful that really is to you, right? Yes, you might have some sense of okay, I can see that they care about me, but it's not particularly helpful. And it's not like you see them as caring more about you just because they are also distressed, right? And it's not helpful if you have to now be the person that is taking care of them because they are so distressed. There was an interview, I think it was with Martha Beck. She's a coach, and she was talking about one of her clients whose husband had a heart attack. And she was very distressed about this, and she was crying, she was upset, and she was talking to her husband, the one who had the heart attack. And she was saying, you don't know what it's like to be the wife of someone who had a heart attack. And she had no awareness of how she was making it all about herself, right? She was upset that he wasn't taking care of her as the person whose husband had a heart attack, and meanwhile he's the person that literally had the heart attack, right? And that's just an example of how we tend to show that we care, and how we actually jump into that distress and we actually make it mean things about ourselves. We make it about ourselves. And I know that can be sometimes really hard to hear, especially when you feel like you've been sacrificing everything for everybody else, right? And you just think I've been giving so much of myself, I have not been making it about me. But I just want you to think about, where could that be true, right? And just sit with it a little bit, just allow it. There's no judgment, there's no shame about it. It's just oh, I've actually been making it about myself. I actually needed them to be helped by me. I needed to be helping. I needed to constantly be doing things for other people because I'm not okay if I'm not doing those things. Okay. And then the idea that there's such a thing as caring too much, or that compassion is the problem, that caring is the problem. And I just want you to think about the idea that maybe that's not the actual problem. And we're kind of similar to the previous point, it's it matters where that caring is coming from, what kind of place that compassion is coming from. So compassion is just love in the presence of suffering. That's all it is, right? It doesn't need to take from you. It doesn't need to be at the expense of you. We can actually be so energized, so lit up, like I said in the beginning, when we really orientate towards I am so lucky that I get to do something where I'm helping someone every single day. Right? I'm helping people. This is what I wanted to do. This is my life's work, right? That idea of being in service of other people can really energize us. it can feel purposeful. It can feel like we're excited to do that, right? It doesn't have to be draining. So it's about where that caring is coming from. And like I said, when it's coming from a place of like lack, like I need it to go well with you, I need you to be helped, I need it to be okay with you in order for me to feel a certain way about myself. Versus I'm already filled up. I'm already taken care of. I'm already validated. I already know that I'm worthy. I already know that I'm loved and accepted and all of the things that I would potentially need from other people. I already have that. That's taken care of. So I don't need that from you. So when I come to you and I'm caring for you, I'm caring about you, it's all about you. This time is for you because I'm taken care of, right? How different that is. It's very, very different. So we are often taught as well that we need that validation, that love, that acceptance from other people. We need them to appreciate us. We need them to validate us. We are taught that caring and compassion means that we jump into that space with them, right? We jump into the pool with them. And true compassion doesn't require a certain outcome. So think about it, like when you are caring, when you are being compassionate towards someone, is that in order to get a certain result, in order to get a certain outcome? I posted this on the group, I think it was yesterday or anyway, recently, but it was a quote that said, "Help is the sunny side of control." I think it's by Anne Lamott. Help is the sunny side of control. We're trying to control the outcome. We're like, I'm caring and I'm being compassionate so that I get this outcome, right? Either that's like you think a certain way about me, or, it has to go well. You have to take my advice and like change your whole life. And so we have a certain attachment to what the outcome of that caring and that compassion is going to be. Versus like just showing up to that person, meeting them where they are, as you are, with what you have available to you, and you're saying, I'm going to help you as much as I can. And if you don't want my help, if you don't walk away from this appreciating me or even thinking that I did help you, like I can't control that. So I'm going to show up as best I can. I'm going to care for you. I'm going to be compassionate. I'm going to meet you where you are, and I'm going to do the best that I can to help you. So one doesn't require a certain outcome. This is true compassion. True compassion, like I said, doesn't involve you feeling what they're feeling. So the way that I also have another live session under the guide section. Under lives, you'll find all the past live sessions. And I did one on compassion fatigue. So you'll find a lot of this information there as well if you want to dive a little bit further into compassion fatigue. But essentially what I said there, or one of the things I said there was, when they look at how do we care without burning out, or we being exhausted, being stressed, all of that, not having empathic distress, not being distressed because of caring, right? They found that we need the combination of compassion and cognitive empathy. So compassion just being that love in the presence of suffering. And cognitive empathy, meaning I mentally understand what you are going through. So I'm not feeling what you're feeling. I'm not taking your emotions onto me, but I can understand what you're going through. And not from a place of like disconnection of like, I can sort of imagine, right? It's like, yeah, I can really see why that would be distressing for you. Like, I can see why this is so difficult for you. I can see why you're struggling with this so much. And one of the interesting things on that is, this is from Brene Brown. She was also saying that the idea of walking in someone else's shoes is a little bit of a misleading thought, because even if we have been in the exact same situation as someone, we might not have felt or thought the way that they did. So we don't need to have been through the exact same thing in order to be compassionate towards someone. So she was just saying it's actually more that we are listening to someone else's account of what it's like to walk in their shoes and believing them. even if it doesn't match our like internal world or our experience of that same experience, right? Or a similar experience in our life. So compassion plus mentally understanding, like being able to picture like what it must be like to be in that scenario, or be struggling with those things, or be suffering in the way that they're suffering. Those two, the combination of those two things is how we care without burning out. And that's what I was talking about, like that's versus the effective form of empathy, which is I feel with you. I'm feeling what you're feeling. I'm taking on those feelings from you. Okay. And I want to say one of the common reasons why we might feel this in as a clinician versus, for example, a relationship, is because we feel like we are responsible for that person's health or that person's outcomes. So if it's not going well with them, it's our fault, right? We are responsible for that. And I talked about this as well in another session, but thinking about the idea of I have a responsibility to my patient. And one of those responsibilities is to be fully taken care of myself, so that I'm not requiring that from them, right? So where's it going with that? Oh yes, I have certain responsibilities to my patients. So a responsibility to being fully taken care of myself, right? I have a responsibility to, keep up with the most recent evidence as best as I can, or whatever it is, right? We have certain, we have a responsibility to maintain certain standards as a clinician, to give informed consent, or whatever it is, like all those things, right? But we are not responsible for them. We're not responsible for their outcome. We meet them, do the best we can. They meet us doing the best they can, and we help them as much as we can, given those two limiting factors, right? So just to note that that's often where because we take that responsibility on ourselves, like when our partner, unless we actually did something, but usually if our partner is just suffering from something random, right? Or this might be a good illustration of the difference, right? When your partner is suffering from something that you don't feel is because of you, versus when your partner is suffering because of something that you do feel is because of you. That's the difference, right? You show up very differently to someone else's suffering when you feel like you caused that and you're trying to feel better about yourself and you're trying to like alleviate that guilt. And you're taking responsibility for those emotions because you feel like you caused it, versus someone just suffering for something that you don't see as something that you were involved with or affected or anything like that. So think about those two things, and that's kind of the difference that I'm talking about. But someone still might, that's why I say it's important to tease out for you what it is exactly, because someone can still feel distress when someone else is suffering, even if they don't feel like they caused it, because they believe that in order for you to know that I care about you, I need to take on your emotions, and I need to show you that I'm also distressed by you being distressed, right? So it can be different things for different people. And so to find out what it is specifically for you, like what is the underlying belief that is causing you to think that more caring equals more burnout, more stress, more exhaustion, right? Versus being more fulfilled, more lit up, more filled up, more excited to go to work. What is that difference for you? Okay, and then the other thing that I wanted to just touch on is this will also, if you want to go back to the compassion fatigue video, what I also mentioned there was the idea of near enemies. So far enemies meaning something that's very obviously not that, right? So like I was talking about when someone doesn't care at all and they like couldn't give a crap, it's like very obvious, right? That is not compassion. But then there are things that kind of look like compassion, but they are not. And they sometimes undermine compassion. And that's things like sympathy or pity, right? Like seeing yourself as like above the other person, and you're like fixing them, and you're like, don't worry, I'm gonna like help you, and like some version of like a hierarchy. And I think this shows up for us mainly when we think about fixing, like I'm here to fix you, right, make you better. Empathic distress, which was what I was mentioning earlier. Things like judgment, which I also mentioned. And then that idea of like needing them to be better for you and not actually for them, or not only for them, right? So it kind of just is a summary of some of the things that I've spoken about, where we think that that's compassion and we think that that's caring, but actually it's something else. And I think this is also like, all of this is why it's so important for us as clinicians to really be taken care of. And I mean that like in every way, like that you are resting and recovering, that you are prioritizing your own health, that you are prioritizing other relationships, right? That you get your love and your validation and your acceptance from places other than your patients. And that idea of self-authorship, right? Like that you are taking control, you are in the driver's seat of your life. You're not depending on, you're not like, almost think about it as like your moods and your self-worth, your image of yourself goes up and down with every patient interaction. Like that's not what we want, right? So you almost like, it's like being dependent, right? That's kind of the definition of codependency, right? We are dependent on something else. So when you are doing well, when things are going well, when the outcomes are good, I feel great. When the outcomes are bad, or when a patient's not appreciative, or when I have a bad, interaction with a patient, my mood goes here. So, right, our emotional state is kind of dependent on what is happening with our patients. That's what can happen when we are dependent on that. And I want you to think about the opposite. Like, I'm in the driver's seat. My emotional health is in my control. I have autonomy and agency over that. It's not dependent on what is happening with my patient. Like, the difference between those two is everything. So that's why I say, like, I feel like that's one of the most important things that we can take care of as clinicians. So like I said in the beginning, if this is something that you struggle with, go ahead and book one of those coaching sessions. They are completely free. You just basically pick whatever time works for you. You can say in the little comment, it asks you like what you want coaching on, and you can just say something along the lines of what we've spoken about if it's specifically for this. Those sessions are for anything. So you literally like, oh, I have this patient tomorrow that always stresses me out. Like, book a session, right? I had this patient experience today where I really got like triggered by it. I was so emotionally like from this experience. Then you book a session as well. If you're like, I don't know what I'm doing with my life, I'm having an existential crisis, you can also book a session. So they're literally there for like any topic. But if you specifically want it on this, you can just say something in the little comment box where it asks you what you want coaching on. You can just say something like compassion or burnout or caring too much or something like that. And we always chat a little bit when we start the session, just to like talk about it, and we can also message about it so that you are clear on like what's happening, and we don't like launch immediately into the coaching and it's recorded from, the first second. We first kind of chat about it. I let you know like how it's gonna work. And then when you're ready and I'm ready, then we press record and we record that coaching session. And then afterwards I take that recording and I post it on the group so that all the clinicians can benefit. So it's like a service to your fellow clinicians as well, when you are vulnerable and you share your struggle with something. But then, of course, you also get personal help with your specific situation. So it benefits everybody when you do that. Trying to think if there's anything. Oh, that's what I also wanted to say. What I do tell clinicians is when we have that session, and there was something in that session that you're like, I would prefer that was edited out. Like, I just don't feel comfortable with that being on the group. I edit that out for you. So don't worry about that. If you say something that you don't want to share after the fact, you just let me know and I'll just edit that out. So don't worry about that. I think that's sometimes a concern. Like, what if I say something stupid or but honestly, like that is one of the things. Like, there's no topic that's stupid, there's no topic that's like insignificant, there's nothing that you can say that would be like something bad that you said. We're all, sharing our stories with each other, but I just want you to know that that is an option, just so you feel comfortable. Like, if there really isn't something if there is something that you share that you actually don't want in it, we just take that out. Okay, awesome. So I look forward to coaching you guys on this. It really is like a huge thing. It's so, so important. So definitely book one of those if this is something that you struggle with. Awesome. Hope you guys have a great afternoon, and I will see you guys soon.